Thank you.
All done.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I only wish that I were talking about something as exciting as court life in the Middle Ages or whatever that was, or tinkering with technology. Tonight we're going to talk about American genre painting. And American genre painting essentially means the painting of people doing what people do. So that is not an official definition for the term, but it's a workable one. So you'll just keep that in your mind. We're going to begin with the phenomenon of American genre painting basically came up in the 1830s in America and lasted through the 19th century. But we're going to go back into the 18th century and see where the school originated. So we're showing here, this is a portrait of Elisha Boardman by Ralph Earl. It was painted in 1789. And what I want to show you is that while this is certainly a portrait, anybody can see it as that, there's other things going on in the picture which are of interest. Number one, of course, the bookshelf, which are right behind him, but also maybe bolts of cloth. That's what they look like to me, bolts of cloth. So we know something about Elisha Boardman without even knowing. We don't even need to read his biography to know that he's interested in these things or that somehow he identifies with these things. He wants us to know that these are things that he does. Now here's a portrait by Charles Willson Peale of Chaucer. This is a self-portrait by Charles Willson Peale, painted in 1822. It's called The Artist in His Museum. This is a very big picture, by the way, Mr. Peale is showing us not so much his face. He's interested, of course, he's in the center of the picture. And so we have no doubt that this is a picture of Charles Willson Peale, and this is his likeness. But much more important to us in this context is he is showing us his museum. The Pennsylvania Academy is the oldest museum, which is on Broad Street and Cherry Street in Philadelphia, is the oldest continually operating museum in the United States. And it was a museum of natural history. And so Charles Willson Peale had brought together bones and plant specimens and rocks and lots of things like that, which you can imagine in 1822. I mean, the country was only 50 years old or something like that. And so he's very keen to show people this. It's also important to notice here that he's doing something here with his right hand. He's pulling back the curtain on himself. He is I don't want to say exposing himself, that would give you the wrong. I'll stick with pulling back the curtain. We use that expression today to more or less reveal something which would be hidden. So he's revealing something about himself. This is a picture by John Nagel. It's called Pat Lyon at the Forge, 1829. My talk tonight, by the way, is constructed somewhat chronologically. So we're beginning in the 18th century, and we're going to move toward the end of the 19th century. This is also a very large picture, and I'm sure by now you can see where I'm going by this. This has got to be, we don't know what Pat Lyons looked like, but that's got to be it, because that's what the picture is called, Pat Lyon at the Forge. In this particular case, the forge Lyon is once again in the middle of the picture, so clearly he's the centerpiece of the picture, but the forge is also quite a big deal. So without even knowing anything more about Pat Lyons, we know that he was an important ironmonger in the city of Philadelphia. And we see, by the way, Independence Hall over there on the upper left, so we know that he is in the city of Philadelphia. Now, we're going to move to, this is by John Singleton Copley, 1773. This is a portrait of Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Mifflin. Now, again, we have to assume that this is what Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Mifflin looked like. So clearly this is a portrait. But once again, Mrs. Mifflin has got a spindle here. She's spinning yarn. And so we would call this thing here, and the forge for that matter, we call these attributes. So Mr. Mifflin there is holding a little book, and I don't know myself, because I haven't looked into that, whether Thomas Mifflin wrote a particular book that we need to know about. I'm inclined to think not. I'm inclined to think that he wants us to know that he is a man of letters. And so he is holding a book which would imply that he is an educated man. Who knows? I don't know if he was a lawyer, but clearly he is an educated man. Mrs. Mifflin may or may not have been actually spinning in her afternoons, but she's striking the pose here as I hate to say housewife, but at least a person who is engaged in domestic pursuits, because that is an attribute that would play to somebody who had obviously made money, and these are upscale Bostonians, and so she wants to let us know that even though she's wearing extremely fine satin dress, very much in the mode of the day, she's also a woman who knows how to keep the house. You will notice also that we have here an interesting feature. This is a Greek or Roman column. So almost no one in America lived in palaces, and even to live in a house with a column would be quite extraordinary. I don't really think that I don't think that this is a feature on their house, but what it does is it imparts to us a sense of grandeur. We just leave it at that. And you notice, by the way, it's quite in the background, and this part of the background is undifferentiated, because we don't want to interfere. Copley didn't want to interfere with the attributes that he's already set up. He didn't want to interfere with the likenesses. So this is maybe more of a portrait than the Charles Willson Peale that we looked at earlier. Now, we're going to jump to England, and this is by one of my favorite painters. Excuse the colors, because these cannot be Arthur Devis's colors. This is Robert Gwilym and his family, painted in 1749. We're going to go backward now. But almost all American art, if not virtually all American art in the 18th century, comes to us from England, because that's where the people were coming here from. And so the painters would naturally look to English styles for their inspiration. So this picture by Devis, which is, by the way, a smallish picture, but this would be a picture maybe just this size, not a big thing at all, not intended to be grand. This is not a portrait. This must be what Gwilym and his family looked like. These are definitely portraits of the family that the painter would have taken one at a time. I don't know how he dealt with the children and so forth, and that's clearly their house in the background. This is actually called a conversation piece. So we have a major shift here away from being a portrait to something else, something that we're going to talk about. The implication in a conversation piece is that this will stimulate some kind of conversation. And the implication, when one comes along on this picture, if I were going through the museum, it wouldn't obviously been hanging in the museum, would have hung in their house, was that the painter caught them just out for a walk in the afternoon. And they happened to be dressed like this, you know. And look, dear, the painter, you know, Arthur Devis is here. And so they pose for their portrait. And we are, of course, familiar with this because today we can take this image in a split second. We know that the painting is not done in a split second, but this is what is being transmitted to us, that these are people, not ordinary people, but these are upper-class people just caught in the process of being upper-class people. This is by Thomas Gainsborough, and I apologize for the fuzziness of this picture. I blew it up from something that was quite small. And this is Thomas Gainsborough himself and his wife and child. And of course, here's their little dog. Now, the dog is doing something quite dog-like. The dog, I think, is drinking from it looks like a little stream, doesn't it? The dog's not posing. So here again, we have Mrs. Gainsborough dressed in this fabulous dress. Who knows? This could have been a Tuesday afternoon. And Gainsborough himself, of course, with his hand just so on his hip, not posing, not in a grand pose. This is a casual attitude that he is striking. So again, we have a picture of upper class people caught in a moment. This is what we do in the afternoon. So now we're going to come back to the United States, and we have, this is a painting by Matthew Pratt, and it's called The American School, 1765. These here are Benjamin West, the painter, and this one here I think is John Trumbull, or maybe this one's John Trumbull, I'm not sure. And these two look like boys. I'm not quite entirely sure who they are. The point of the picture is that and by the way, this was painted in London. Here we have a group of students, young men, again doing what they would be doing. I mean, I'm fully willing to believe that this is what they wore to the academy to paint in, and I'm quite willing to believe that this would be if you did go in with a photograph in or a camera rather in 1765, you might very well have caught this scene. So we're moving into something where people are doing actually believable things. But again, clearly this painting was not done in a second, and so it's posed. It's very highly composed. This picture strikes a bit of a balance. This picture is by John Greenwood, and this is perhaps his only painting. I don't think that any other painting by him is known. It's called Sea Captains Carousing in Suriname, 1752. And we have broken from tradition in a big way here. We don't have any upper class people in this picture, and nobody's behaving like an upper class person. We have chairs tipped over here. We have dogs licking God knows what off the floor. This man is throwing up. You know, we're behaving very, very badly here in the saloon, and so this picture is perhaps the first American genre painting that we know of. It's extremely early for that. I mean, being 1752, he's way ahead of his time. I don't think anybody at the time would have thought that he was going anywhere with this, because he's breaking molds here. This is not the way we don't want to show ourselves off this way, but there you have it. So now we're going to go back to John Singleton Copley again, and this is John Singleton Copley, Sir William Pepperell and his family, 1778. I bring this up again to bring us back into the mainstream from where John Greenwood left us a minute ago. And we have no doubt again that this is Mr. Pepperell, and we have no doubt that this is his wife and their children. And these girls, of course, are not posing. It's hard to know what they're doing. There may be, this looks like a string of beads perhaps, and I can't really tell what that is. And this child, of course, is doing a very baby-like. And then we have the dogs down here. And this is probably their estate, even though I don't see a building back there. The implication, of course, is that Mr. Pepperell, oh, I left out, see that? And the curtain, very, very fancy drapery that we have here. So Mr. Pepperell is doing very well. This is the message that Mr. Copley is sending, and this is the message, by the way, that Mr. Copley was hired to transmit. So this is a painting by John Lewis Crimmel called The Quilting Frolic. It has a lot more to do with the Greenwood than it does with the picture that we just looked at by Copley. Again, we have ordinary people now. We have very ordinary people doing very ordinary things. This lady here appears to be maybe doing the wash or something like that. She's putting things into a basket. Surely Thomas Gainsborough's or Mrs. Thomas Mifflin would not have been posed doing this. We do have a tea service here, which looks quite nice. We do have portraits on the wall, and we have a very fancy Philadelphia or Newport, pardon me, style federal clock, and this little thing here speaks of gentility, as does the porcelain cabinet over here. But we have something else in the picture which is really quite unique, and this is a very early example of it. Does anybody see anything quite unique in this picture?
Yes, an African American.
Yes, exactly right. We have two, in fact. Here's another one. We have an African American over here who is playing a fiddle, and we don't know whether he's undoubtedly not family. I don't know if he was, whether he was a slave or whether he is a minstrel hired for the occasion. But obviously we have a party here. We have a little something, not exactly confetti, but something like that. We also have something else here. We have at least 1, 2, 3 generations of the family. We're not entirely sure who this family is. We've lost something here. This is not a portrait, is my guess. This may be, all of these figures may be generic. And so we've crossed a little threshold now. So this picture is not a picture of the Pepperell family or the Mifflin family or some other known family doing what they do. This is just a picture of people doing what people do. Now, mind you, they're solidly middle class, these people. Look at the fashion that this young lady is wearing here. She's wearing the latest 1820s type frock. But the presence of the black people in the picture, and by the way, a little plug for a book I just read called 1793. Get this book. It tells you about what Columbus brought here in 1792 that he didn't even know he was bringing, one of which was, of course, slavery. And in 1720, if I'm not mistaken, there were 3 times as many Africans in the Americas as there were Europeans. This is not what they told me in school, but this book is fantastic. So anyway, so that's where the presence of the black person, we're going to look at that again in a while. We're going to look at it right here, for example. This is Copley again. This painting is called Watson and the Shark, 1778. Now this is painted in Boston Harbor, and this is either a real or an apocryphal event. We're not entirely sure of that. It's pretty well documented. The event, Tom down here, Watson went for a swim, I guess, I don't know, maybe just a bath, and he was attacked by a shark, took his leg off. And I don't know whether any of the rest of this actually happened, but this picture, which is sort of taken from classical antiquity, the pyramidical design here of the figures kind of goes back to the raft of the Medusa and things like that. But whether these people are actual faces of people who were there at the time, don't exactly know. It's not important for our purposes here. We have a dramatic event here. This is we're going to accept the fact that this actually happened. You see the shark here, by the way. I don't know if you thought this was a suitcase down here, but it's a very odd looking thing, but that's the shark. His tail's way back there. I mean, he's obviously a monster. So there are 2 versions of this picture, by the way, one in the Boston Museum and one in the National Gallery. They vary just slightly. But for our purposes here, we're once again showing an event, people doing something that people do. Now we're going to shift gears just a little bit, because this is by Benjamin West. It's called The Death of Wolfe, 1770. And so this was an event on the plains of Quebec, where General Wolfe, who was an English general, actually died. And of course, the Indian is here, and the British soldiers are shown over here. These are undoubtedly portraits of people who were engaged in this event. We doubt very much. We have this pyramidical composition again here, which once again goes back to classical antiquity. We doubt very much that when General Wolfe died, he died in this pose right here, which is reminiscent of Christ coming off the cross. I mean, so we have a little hagiography going on here. We're elevating General Wolfe. I mean, you notice he's not bleeding or anything like that. There's nothing ugly about this death. And this is a heroic military picture, and military pictures kind of morphed from portraits to, I don't want to say genre, we have to say, we call them history pictures. They're way above genre. They're in a level all their own. And the purpose of these pictures is to make grand the ugly fact of war. Wolfe did die, but whether or not he in this battle, but whether or not he went out in just this configuration is highly doubtful. Here is another picture. This is called the sortie by the garrison at Gibraltar in 1789, another revolutionary picture. No question that these are portraits of the generals who were there at the storming of the garrison at Gibraltar. Now we're going to move out to the Middle West. This is by George Caleb Bingham, and it's called The County Election, 1852. We're going to skip whether or not these are portraits of people. We're going to just take, you're going to have to take it on faith from me that these are probably not. Bingham, by the way, I don't know if you will notice this or not, but Bingham had a way of painting people that made them all look like they were related. He had a very unique way of painting a face, and so the characteristics of the people in this room, as I look across, you don't look like you're all related. But if Bingham had painted you all, you would. So this picture, once again, I can't help pointing out the dog, because the dog brings us down to the sort of the lowest common denominator of what not people are doing, but certainly dogs. You know it yourself. If you have a family picnic or something, the dog will be wandering in and out, not exactly posing. These people, I think, are playing a game of tiddlywinks or mumbly peg or something like that. This guy here is having a beer in the day when you could buy a vote. And this guy up here is about to give a talk, or he has maybe just finished it. I'm not sure. This guy's keeping the record. We have here I have to point out, this thing here sets us up with this nice pyramidical composition again. It's not necessary. Bingham didn't need to put that there, but that's why it's there. So we have here again a picture of people just doing in the square what people do in election day. This picture is always sort of trotted out when we need to show the power of American democracy, when we need to show the roots of American democracy. This is the way it started. And of course, here in Vermont, we have town meeting, and that's exactly what it looks like, except for the costumes. This is another picture by Bingham. This one is called The Jolly Flatboatman. This picture is privately owned, believe it or not. And I would love to tell you the story about how that happened, but I'm not going to do that. This picture is painted. These guys are taking a raft full of something or other, some commerce, down either the Ohio or the Missouri River, outside of St. Louis probably, and they've loaded the boat. This is firewood down here. It looks to me. I don't know whether this boat, I doubt this boat had an engine per se. It's not a steamboat. This would simply be a barge. This boat floated. And this is the way, of course, commerce was taken down to New Orleans, where it was offloaded and sold. So but these guys are nooning, which is what people do in the middle of the day. You get a break from work, and you have a sandwich and a beer, and you carouse or something like that. So these guys are dancing, and so we have a sense of what a good time these guys are having. Who knows whether they were enjoying themselves quite this much. This guy here bears mention. He's looking at us. And so he brings us into the picture. He's saying, see what we're doing? Who are you guys? And maybe we're on the next boat, just off the stern. But this is a very engaged. This is a device that Bingham used. This picture here is by John Ferguson Weir. It's called Forging the Shaft, 1874, of course, these guys are pulling. This looks like terribly dangerous work, I must say, but they're forging a steel shaft in the blast furnace here, and they're rotating it on this works here. You see the pulley, the guy over here is pulling this thing, so it's rotating in here in order to make it round. And this big shaft might be, it looks too big to be an engine propeller for a ship, but I don't know exactly what it is. But for our purposes here, these are working class men, of course, doing what people do, and they are definitely working. So they're not nooning, and they're not posing, and they're not dressed in silk. This is a pure genre picture for our purposes right here. Now, this is by Richard Catton Woodville, one of my favorite painters. It's called Politics in the Oyster House, 1848. You'll notice once again this man here is looking at us. This man here, of course, is boring him. We have the curtain over here, which has been nicely pulled back for us, so we have the feeling that we are being admitted to whatever it is these guys are saying. At the center of the picture, we have this curious hand gesture here, and so we should pay attention to it, even if we don't know what it means. He's either saying in the first place or in the second place, something like that, or maybe maybe this is what he uses his hand for. We can't deny the fact, or we can't ignore the fact, that it takes pride of place here in the center of the picture. We also must pay very close attention to this little thing right here, the newspaper. In 1848, curiously enough, the same year that this picture was painted, the Picayune down in New Orleans invented the drum press. Heretofore, newspapers were made one at a time, like this. Boom, boom. The Picayune had a press that picked the paper up and plopped it down in the ink and then pressed it and rolled them off. And this gave the Picayune the ability to make 1,000 times more paper, printed newspapers, than the old way, 1,000 times. So Richard Catton Woodville is showing that this paper is not under his arm, it's not folded and just sitting over there, it's not on the floor. It's pretty close to the center of the picture. And so this would be the equivalent of a brand new computer to our eyes. I mean, if he were holding an iPhone or something like that, and we had just heard of the iPhone, we would note it. We would say, oh my God, what a sharp cookie this guy is. He's right up to date. So to an audience from 1848, they would be noting the prominence of the newspaper. Now, this picture is actually by Jacques-Louis David, and it's called The Oath of the Herati. It was painted in 1785. I only show it here because I want you to just remember this pose that these guys are in right here. And this hangs in the Louvre. This picture is by William Sidney Mount. This picture was painted in 1830. And it's quite like The Oath of the Herati. It's constructed in the same way. But look what we've done. We've gone from Roman soldiers with these beautiful weapons, these beautiful swords, and these beautifully dressed women in this tabernacle, this whatever this is, this hall, to boys fighting, quarreling. I mean, this is really an exceptional leap for William Sidney Mount. This is the earliest painting by Mount. Mount was from Long Island, and he is probably America's most important genre painting, or he's among the 4 or 5. Let's say that. This picture from 1830 is his first painting where he paints people doing people things. And he chooses boys, and he borrows that composition in order to give his picture a sense of importance, of grandeur. He does, of course, put the black boy in here. He's not at the center of the attention, not the center of attention, but he's clearly in the picture. And so Mount shows that he is willing to put the black boy in the picture. And by the way, by 1830, the United States already knew that, most people knew that the black person was part of society. Painters knew it better than anybody, perhaps, but they weren't willing to bring the black person into the center of the picture, but they did include him. Mount did it lots of times, and we're going to see lots of instances. By the way, this picture was found in a barn in Pennsylvania, and it was sold to its owners for the privilege of cleaning out the barn. And they did very, very well with it. They didn't know what it was. This is by Richard Catton Woodville again, the same guy that painted the politics in the Oyster House. The newspaper in this particular case is right at the center of the painting. This is also painted in 1848. Woodville was an exceedingly busy guy then. This picture, which now hangs, belonged for 150 years to the National Academy in New York, now hangs at the new Museum Crystal Bridges in Bentonville, Arkansas. And we have here a black man and a little black girl. Not at the center of the picture, but clearly important. They're not distracted from they're paying attention to what this guy, oh, by the way, what this guy is talking about, he's talking about the Mexican War was just concluded very dramatically in the favor of the United States government army. We went down to Mexico and read them the riot act and shot, I don't know, 4 or 5 people. And Mexico owed us some horrible, huge amount of money, like $5 million. And we said to them, we'll forgive the debt and we'll take a third of what we now know of as the United States, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. We'll take all that and you guys will get debt forgiveness, okay? And so they said, okay. And so that's what this guy is reading right here. And this is the Picayune, because the Picayune had a guy there for the Treaty of Hidalgo. He was on the spot. He watched the thing happen. He gets in a boat and quick as he could go back to New Orleans to report the story. I don't know how many months or weeks had to go by in order to make that happen. But in those days, I mean, how many of you were watching the Pope get crowned today, you know, in real time? This is really, really a big deal. No one has ever given a really good explanation for what this guy is doing over here. He's snuffing out a match into the snapdragons. We can only suppose that this gesture, and maybe these snapdragons, I don't know, meant something to contemporary Americans. I've never read a good explanation of what is going on there. I have to point out this nice pyramid here again. This picture is by Thomas Leclerc, who is a virtual unknown in America. Something like 4 paintings are known by Thomas Leclerc. Suki and I went out to look at this picture in Detroit. It was in an auction a couple of years ago with an estimate of something like $8,000 to $10,000 on it, artist unknown. And I went out there to look at it because I recognized it as a Thomas Leclerc, because these handbills over here on the fence, and this sort of little shipping crate with this kind of curiously backward-leaning stenciling is sort of a signature of Thomas Leclerc. I didn't recognize it just like that, but a little bit of work, and I came up with it. He also is very keen. He painted some people eating apples. There's also, we have a black man here who's inching into the middle of the picture. And this guy here is obviously unhappy with these ruffians. He's storming off in a huff. There's also another really interesting signature of the painter here, and I'm going to show you this. I think you'll see what I mean. Look here at these hands, and this hand here. In fact, look at all the hands. They're all about 15% too small. Do you see that? Now, what's up with that? I mean, remember I told you George Caleb Bingham had a way of painting everybody looked like they were related? Thomas Leclerc, either meaningfully or not, shrunk all his subjects' hands. And this attribute follows him through the 4 or 5 pictures that he painted. Who else would do that? So this picture brought a fortune when it was sold. We didn't get it for $7,000 to $8,000. We're back to William Sidney Mount right now. And this picture is called The Power of Music, 1847. The black man is not only pretty close to the center of the picture, he's in the foreground. And so William Sidney Mount, as I said to you before, was willing to put the black man into the action of a picture. So he also did something else, which is really quite remarkable. He's not caricaturized. He's listening to the music here, of which he is not a part. The white men are in the barn playing the fiddle, and I don't know whether he has another instrument there or not. The black man's clearly appreciating the music, but he's not a vaudeville character. He's not being caricatured by William Sidney Mount. He's got a great dignity, even though the fact that he has patches on his jeans. Here's another nice little item right here. This is obviously whiskey, and this item right here is an attribute of which came to be associated with, this is an axe, for those of you who can't see it, there's an axe over here. This attribute became associated with Abraham Lincoln. The axe is an attribute of hard work for, honest work. That's what I'm after, honest work. And so that's why it became associated with Lincoln. But this predates any awareness of Lincoln. Now, this picture is by John Mick Stanley. It's called Gambling for the Buck, and it's 1867, so it's post-Civil War. I bring it up here because Western genre, so-called Western genre, is another little subcategory of American genre painting. By the way, we're well into genre painting right now. We've been in it since about 1830, when remember the schoolboys quarreling? That's kind of the beginning of full-blown genre painting. We're now into 1867, and these Indians here were undoubtedly painted doing what Indians do by John Mick Stanley. Whether they were in full battle dress to play cards is probably not accurate. Probably not accurate. But again, Mick Stanley is not. He's not caricaturizing these Indians. He is giving them. They have great dignity. And we have some elements of still life hanging up here in the top of the lodge. Here's a dead buck, just happens to be lying on the floor. Mick Stanley is showing us. Do you remember the beautiful satin that Mrs. Thomas Mifflin was wearing, her gown? The gown has more to do with Copley than it does with Mrs. Mifflin, because Copley is showing us how well he can paint satin. And so Mick Stanley is showing us here how well he can pretend to be Copley. I mean, this is no masterpiece. This is no masterpiece of painting over here. But it's not inconsiderable. He didn't have to paint that. This looks like a sheep. Could that be a sheep? It's a dog. Okay, from over here it looks like a sheep. I would much rather it be a dog, because I don't know what a sheep would be doing out there. So this picture was painted probably west of the Mississippi, if not close to the Mississippi. This picture is by Seth Eastman, and this picture is called Chippewa Indians Playing Checkers, for 1848. Again, the Indians are dressed in sort of typical what they would actually wear. I think we can probably, I think I'm not mistaken to say that this would be identifiable, this bear claw necklace with the Chippewa. Maybe the way he's wearing his feather would be identifiable with the Chippewa. This fellow, of course, is not wearing anything. This hut that they're in would very definitely be identifiable with the Chippewa. And by now, of course, this is 1848. They have already got guns. We're assuming they were playing checkers, too, that they knew how to play checkers. This is another example of Western genre. We're not going to dwell very much on this. This picture is by Charles Days, The Death Struggle, and it hangs right here in the Shelburne Museum, just up the road. We should be very proud of that. So this is an example of Western genre again. Obviously, we have Indians, and so Western genre, or pictures with Indians in them, almost always means something west of Ohio. There were, of course, Eastern Indians, but we have very, very few examples of American paintings painted of Eastern Indians. I'm not going to try to guess what kind of, but you see this chap back here is wearing red face. He's got clay or something on his face, so clearly he's on the warpath. This is a highly dramatic picture. I mean, the birds don't take any notice, but these guys are going off the cliff. And you can tell that this is a deep, deep ravine they're going into. He's making this little pathetic grab for this branch. This is not going to save him. I mean, we're going over. There are some things worth pointing out in this picture. Of course, we have this very classical compositional device going on here. Days is very often called the bug-eyed horse painter because all his horses have this, oh my God, look on their faces. Their eyes look like billiard balls. Another thing that is interesting to me is this vermilion right here is a signature color for Days. It comes right out of the tube. I mean, he didn't mix this picture. He uses this vermilion straight from the tube, and when I look for, if I come across a picture, and I have discovered a couple of pictures by Charles Days, there's almost always this color in it someplace. I love this little device up here. He's showing us that this man wears a hat most of the day, and I think everyone in this room is familiar with this look, where you're suntanned from the eyes down and white from the eyes up. Sorry, going the wrong direction. Now, I just show you this picture by Charles Sprague. It's called The Arab Jeweler, and this picture is 1882, and I bring it in here today. By the way, this is a fantastic device. This is a beautiful piece of foreshortening and a lovely bit of painting. I bring it here because this is an example of Orientalism. And Orientalism means paintings done somewhere between Constantinople and coming around to the northern coast of Africa, which in the 1840s Flaubert would have called the Orient. And if any of you want a very hilarious read, you could read The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain, which is his diary of going around the Mediterranean on a steamship to the Orient. And he starts in Gibraltar, and then of course they stop in Rome, and they stop in Athens, and then they stop in Constantinople, and on they go around like that, and something hilarious happened to them all the way around. But the Orientalism was very fashionable in London and Paris from the 1840s. It didn't really catch on in America until the 1870s. Today, it's stone dead as a collectible in America because Americans are not very keen. We've lost the sense of romance that attached to this picture when it was first painted. This would have been an exceedingly exotic subject matter for Americans and continental collectors alike, who would have thought of this picture as something just, I can't believe I got to go there. You don't see this. And we have all these stories by Twain and Flaubert and others, of course, many others, about this exotic part of the world that we would never go